Peace and love, family. My name is Wandile Msomi, and welcome to the Global View on the African Perspective. We've been thinking about this for quite some time as the African Perspective. People on social media have been DMing us, tagging us, commenting, and writing to us saying we need a platform where we can orally present some of these things that we're talking about, especially what's going on in the world and seeing how important South Africa has become, or South Africans have realized how important South Africa is, and Africa is in the world. And so they spoke about and they wrote about to us about the importance of having this platform where we can discuss what's going on in the world and where we fit in as Africans, and giving an African perspective to current global affairs. So I thought that was very important. I believed in the vision when it was presented to me, and I'm happy to be here. And so let's not waste any more time. Let's talk global politics. All right. So I do want to start with President Donald Trump. That's the theme for today. The inauguration of the 47th President of the United States of America, and what this means for us in South Africa, what it means for us as Africans on the continent and as Africans in the diaspora as well. What does it mean moving away from a Biden administration in the United States into a Trump administration? Does foreign policy in the United States ever change? Uh, does it matter who the president of the United States is? I know I've argued that whether you have Obama or Bush, just the horse is the same, just different jockeys, different riders, but the horse is the same. It does, however, feel a bit different with with Trump, with this new and anti-war common sense Trump, very different Trump to 2016, and we'll argue that, and we'll have many shows to argue that and argue other points as well. But what I do want to focus on is what to expect as the United States is about to inaugurate its 47th president of its country. And I want to talk about foreign policy. I don't want to discuss domestic politics, abortion, and all those things that are very serious in the United States at the moment. I do want to rather focus on foreign policy, something that concerns us a little bit more. And when I think of the United States and foreign policy in 2025, I think about what's going on in Eastern Europe. I do think about Ukraine. I do think about Russia and the policy there. So let's talk about Ukraine and Russia, because this is an important subject for us, especially on the African continent. The African continent, various countries have taken positions. Countries have been punished for the positions they've taken. Countries have been punished for having an independent foreign policy. Countries have been undermined. The independence of countries have been undermined for having an independent foreign policy. South Africa being one of those countries, although very few American politicians, very few, have spoken about sanctions for South Africa for its support or its perceived support of Russia, right? So we'll remember the U.S. ambassador, for example, the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, who tried to destabilize the South African economy, perpetuating a lie about South Africa arming Russia, right? So those were all I viewed at the time as warning shots to the South African government and to the South African people to say, listen, if you don't toe the line, we can tip this. We can tip the rand, and we can collapse your economy overnight. So those were warning shots. Um, the U.S. exercising its power using its ambassador here. So I don't believe that a U.S. ambassador could just go on TV and say something like that without the endorsement of the White House to say, okay, you can deliver those warning shots. You remember with Santon, there were talks about there's a bomb in Santon and so on. And one thing that has not been investigated that I think needs to be investigated is how much money was lost just that day. How much did the economy lose that day? You know, from a false notification by the U.S. embassy in South Africa that there was a bomb threat or an imminent terrorist attack in South Africa. So all of those were warning shots, and many countries faced more severe punishments and warning shots and things like that. So Ukraine and Russia remains a very, very important event in the world right now. And I do feel right now we are entering its conclusion. Why do I believe that? So the first thing is that we need to understand is there is no way Ukraine would beat Russia. There is no pathway for a Ukrainian victory. It's impossible. It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. It can't happen, and many will argue that it shouldn't happen. But before you even go making the point that it shouldn't happen, it just won't happen. Ukraine does not have the resources, does not have the manpower, does not have the abilities and capabilities to defeat really arguably the strongest military in the world, which is Russia. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. It's impossible. It's an impossibility. That I believe the U.S. government knows this. The U.S. government understands this. Whoever believes that Ukraine has some kind of chance of winning and defeating Russia, I think that borders delusion. And I don't want to insult anybody, but it does, to be honest, and we can have that discussion. And Trump then comes in and says, and agrees with that, Ukraine can't win. They can't. Because if Russia, and I remember Trump saying this, if Russia is pushed to the corner, you know, they have nuclear weapons that Ukraine do not have. So they could still drop a nuke and it's over. Once Russia does that, it's over. And Ukraine does not have the same capabilities. And the idea that if Russia were to drop a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, then there would be World War III is not true. The US would not drop a nuclear bomb on Russia unless Russia dropped a nuclear bomb on the US. So there is no pathway for Ukrainian victory. And the South Africans know this. The South Africans understand this. And we knew this from the very beginning. The government knew this from the very beginning. It was futile to say, oh, I'm supporting Ukraine and we're giving Ukrainians resources and guns and all that kind of stuff to fight Russia to help NATO expand its territory. Absolute impossibility. So, and now you have a candidate for U.S. president who has been president before and didn't have a very, very tight relationship, a good relationship with Ukraine because of what was going on with Hunter Biden. And when you go to the impeachment, I think impeachment one had to do with Ukraine and the phone call that Trump had with Zelensky, asking Zelensky to investigate, I think, Hunter Biden, if I'm not mistaken, because he was doing some funny business in Eastern Europe at the time. And of course, they said, quid pro quo, and they impeached the guy. So that was impeachment one, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, because impeachment two was the January 6th thing. So now a candidate for US president then says, come on, there's no way Ukraine is going to win. We can't operate from that realm. We must operate from the understanding that we need to save lives. And that was very controversial when Donald Trump said that. that I'm not, when he said, no, I'm not going to talk about a Ukrainian victory or Russian victory. I want to talk about saving lives. And of course, when you talk about saving lives, you inadvertently are talking about a Russian victory. And that was very controversial in the United States. And I remember listening to President Trump when he articulated that, and when others articulated it as well. I think Vivek, Tulsi Gabbard, also. All these people are going to be in his government, in his administration. When they articulated this, including Trump, I thought, and I said to myself, well, this is common sense, um, common sense is back. It's being mainstreamed by Donald Trump. Democrats used to be the party of common sense, and it looks now under Trump, it looks like the Republicans have become, you know, they have become the party of common sense, and the party that says, you know what, um, that looks at reality, you know, and that's what Trump has been able to do, and that's what I expect from him on that front, to when negotiating, to say, you know what, the territory that is now occupied by Russia should remain with the Russians, and the territory that is currently occupied by the Ukrainians should remain with the Ukrainians. I think that is the solution that he's going to come up with. The Russians would like to be happy with that. I think that would bring an end to the war. But of course, it depends whether Zelensky, when the Europeans are happy with that, and I suspect they won't be. But they can't finance Ukraine forever without U.S. support. They can't continue a day fighting Russia. So that then forces them to negotiate. Zelensky refused to negotiate before because he was emboldened by the Americans, who said, "Don't negotiate with this guy. Fight him until you win." And I'm sure he knew he can't beat Russia, but he was profiting, continues to profit from this war. He's getting billions. He's getting billions of dollars that are not even being audited. He's getting weapons. I mean, I heard stories that he is selling some of these weapons, or some people are selling some of these weapons, and they're making a lot of money. The oligarchs in Ukraine, are making billions and billions of dollars. And now Trump then comes in and puts an end to that with just common sense, nothing sophisticated. So I do believe that after years of Africa trying to maintain its independent foreign policy with regards to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, finally they are being vindicated, because there is now a U.S. president who is about to be inaugurated, who holds the same view as that was, as a view that was held by, or is held by, a majority, African countries and the global South. So that's on that front. But there is still Israel and Palestine issue, which I don't want to talk about because there might be a new development there, and I don't want this, I don't want this today's show to be irrelevant in the next coming days. So let me just park my comments on Palestine and Israel, and let's wait for those developments. One thing that I think South Africans and Africans will find very interesting, and I think this is a critique they have on President Trump, and that's President Trump's view on BRICS. This is very important. I remember when South Africa hosted the BRICS summit, people were talking about a BRICS currency. I mean, they spoke about a BRICS currency when Russia was hosting as well, but that was it was in addition to the discussions that were taking place in South Africa. Just normal people, just the average people, talking about moving away from the US dollar and so on. So certainly, I certainly understand the nervousness of Africans regarding currency and trade, now that uh, now that Trump is in office, and the sustainability of BRICS, now that Trump is back in office. And this is what I agree with. Trump remains the biggest threat to BRICS. Whether he succeeds maybe in breaking up BRICS, I'm sure that's the aim of the American government. Remember, one aspect of it is the Americans feared the unity of Russia and China. Now you have Russia, China, South Africa, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all these countries. You throw in Egypt there, you throw in Ethiopia there, and then you throw in Brazil there. You know, at some point Argentina, but then um, of course they withdrew after they had been accepted because of political change in that country. I certainly understand they feared a Russia China unity, but there's nothing they can do about it now. But when you're going to include all these countries, they're even more scared because now you combine these emerging markets, you put them in a room together, and they walked out of their room talking about moving away from the U.S. dollar. So certainly Trump saw this when he was running for president, and I have no doubt in my mind thought about plans to shut it down. This whole talk about moving away from the U.S. dollar. So uh, those of us who felt that Trump might have been the better candidate for the world in terms of world peace, not the best candidate, but better than maybe Kamala Harris. Those of us who believe that were not oblivious of the fact that Trump possessed some kind of a threat towards, for BRICS, a threat that did not exist with Kamala Harris. We knew that because Trump had already articulated it, saying, no, we won't do business with any country that wants to move away from the U.S. dollar. We are not we're not going to do business with them. We're going to put 100% tariff. They won't be able to sell anything. They won't even be able to sell a shoe in the United States. And okay, I get that. However, there's another part of what Trump said that a lot of people are not talking about. He acknowledged that the U.S. government has abused the dollar, sanctioning countries all over the world, just completely abusing the power of the dollar. And he said we shouldn't do that as the United States. We shouldn't do that. We should reserve sanction for very, very serious stuff. You can't disagree with the country and then sanction it. And this was Trump's own, interpretation of what was going on, and saying the reason why these countries are coming together and saying they want to move away from the US dollar is because we also have not been fair when it comes to the US dollar. We also have not, used it properly. This is a US president admitting that we have abused the US dollar. That is why the world wants to move away from the dollar. And he says we have to safeguard the dollar, even if it means preventing or stop abusing it. Right. Because without the power of the US dollar, then the US would be a third world country. These are not my words. These are President Trump's words. So there is certainly that acknowledgement, and that's the acknowledgement that we haven't heard really from a US president. So I do hope that this is the part where I'm not sure whether there's still the guys with the black suits and the black ties, that I controlling that office. There are still the Zionists, there are still the lobby groups that control that office. So when someone in the U.S. in particular runs for president, they say one thing, and when they're in office, they do tend to do another because they can't deal with the lobby groups that are there. But seeing that it's a second term, I do believe he might have a little room. He's dealt with so much. I don't think he'll be easily bullied in his second term, having received such a mandate on these messages. He's also thinking about his legacy, right? So he's thinking about his legacy. He's thinking about the fact that he's received a really big mandate from the American people. So, but at the same time, you know, I'm not naive about the fact that those lobby groups are really, really powerful in the United States. So I'm not too sure when it comes to BRICS and how and when it comes to the U.S. dollar and how whether they'll continue abusing the U.S. dollar or they'll tone it down a bit. If they tone it down, how much? What about the sanctions on Zimbabwe and other countries where both the government and the opposition are saying, please lift these sanctions, how we will react to that. So I know that South Africa has been petitioning for that for quite some time, and I do see South Africa continuing to petition the U.S. government when it were to lift the sanctions, particularly on Zimbabwe. So it's really going to be interesting to see Trump's second term. I am very optimistic for him that I think he's going to have a successful presidency. What he ran on, a lot of it is good, but you can't be naive. At the same time, you have to think about the fact that there are still lobby groups, there are still those powerful people behind the scenes who are going to try to pull the strings. So the question is, will he be able to fight them off? Very few U.S. presidents have been able to do that. If you do that, you know what happens. Ask the late great Jimmy Carter, another brilliant man, probably the only person who was president of the United States that I could call brilliant and really great guy. But I'm not talking about the late Jimmy Carter here. But if you wanna know what happens, if you wanna know what happens if you do you do what you feel like what your conscience is telling you to do, then ask Jimmy Carter what happened to him, the late President Jimmy Carter, what happened to him when he did that. You know, but like I said, it's his second term. Well, with President Carter, it was his first term, so they dealt with him easily. But with Trump, it's his second term, so he might have a little bit of leeway there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Trump is going to do with his presidency. I'm looking forward to seeing him here in South Africa, and I know he will be in South Africa next year. No, this year actually. It'll be quite interesting to see that. So hopefully, I'll also be there as part of the media. So let's grow let's grow this podcast. Let's create a very loyal base. Let's engage and let's talk about various things. And we'll bring in people to the show and then we'll discuss various issues. But this was the first. This was the first episode, and I just wanted to talk about what I see happening over the next 4 years with the Trump presidency, particularly uh, foreign policy. So thank you very much. I just wanted to share those thoughts, and we'll talk about other issues, as we move. Particularly the issue on Syria is a very big one that I want us to discuss, and hopefully, if we can bring someone that I know who's one of the experts in that, and we'll just bring and we'll have a discussion, and that podcast will probably be very very long, but I wanted a nice short one for the first show to just give an overview, but I'm most excited to listen to your feedback and to read your comments and what you think and what you expect from the Trump presidency. Otherwise, thank you very much. Peace and love.